Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This week's video is going to look a little bit different from my other videos. A few months ago, back in December, I got to attend John Johnston's Tests and Standards class, and I learned so much from that class. I actually did an after action report and posted that to my YouTube channel, so if you feel like going and checking that out, please do, but that's not at all the point of today's video. After that class, John Johnston and Melody Lauer of Citizens Defense Research invited me to attend their Armed Parent class this upcoming July. And the more that I learned about the class and what to kind of expect from it, the more I felt like it would be really applicable to those who watch my videos. And so I actually asked John Johnston and Melody Lauer to come on to today's video just to talk about the class and kind of explain what happens during that class. Something that I wanted to make clear going into this video is that making this video is not at all something that John Johnston and Melody Lauer asked me to do. This is just something that I felt like would be really applicable to you guys, as it has been for me. And I'm really excited to take this class and just wanted to bring it to your attention. So without further ado.
So I just wanted to start off by just asking you guys to introduce yourselves and then just kind of give me an idea of what Citizens Defense Research, what kind of classes you guys offer.
Well, my name is Melody Lauer, and I've been a firearms instructor now for, I think, 13 years at this point. It really started out as just a desire to, learn more for myself and to be competent and proficient with the tools that I was using to defend myself. And as I kept going and getting more education, it kind of naturally progressed into starting to teach other people. And if it has to do with self-defense, I've probably dabbled in it to some degree or the other over the last 13 years. Everything from extreme close quarters gunfighting with Craig Douglas to jujitsu and weapons and all sorts of stuff. It's kind of just a deep passion of mine. I don't come from any law enforcement military background. I'm just a mom of 3 kids who's trying to do the best that she can as far as being able to defend myself and those that I love. And how that represents itself in Citizens Defense Research is, I think John and I both wanted an entity that, and hence the name Citizens Defense Research, that was very specific to the issues that normal people who carry guns face, not military, not law enforcement, and based solidly upon research and not on just kind of tradition or based on ideas or just things that we had heard. We are very passionate about challenging the status quo. And as my mother always used to say, the truth is not afraid of questions, it will hold up. So if there's something that we are examining that we kind of know to be true, and it really is true, it will stand the test of time and it will stand our scrutiny. But if it's not true, we will challenge it and we'll try to either find or test until we've come up with something that we believe to be accurate and a good representation of how it fits for regular citizens and not your specialty groups.
So I'm John Johnston. I actually learned how to shoot before I learned how to ride a bicycle. So I was 4 when I started shooting, became interested in at the time, the tactical community somewhere around 8 or 9, and was, reading things like Mass Ayub and all of the, handgun magazines and stuff like that from a very early age. And, grew up, had some jobs where I carried a gun professionally as part of my job. And, also privately, Ohio got concealed carry allowed in 2004. So started carrying a handgun concealed as a private citizen, outside of any sort of professional capacity. And, was sort of doing the thing, well, I've been shooting my whole life, and got interested in training specifically because of a guy named Todd Green, who's no longer with us, but he was doing a thing at the time, pistoltraining.com, got involved in the forum there and went to the first Polypalooza that happened. Another trainer by the name of Paul Gomez passed away, and some friends of his put together this event, Sherman House and William April. William's not with us anymore either. I'm starting to feel old because my friends a lot of them aren't here anymore. But anyway, got interested in actually training in like the private sense. And one of the very first open enrollment classes I took was with Tom Givens, and he started that class with a discussion of context. And everything that I had looked at and been interested in up until that point was very much military or law enforcement based, because that was just what you did. And his discussion of context, or his introduction of context, really sort of sat with me. Started working inside of the industry around, actually before that, right around the Polypalooza time period. And as part of my job, had the opportunity to go and take a lot of training with a lot of people, and really started thinking about context. And I was always, as a kid and especially as an adult, one of the annoying people that is like, well, why? And in retrospect, I wish I had been a little more conscientious about how I approached that, because I know I made a lot of mistakes and was very unintentionally rude to a lot of people in an effort to fulfill that drive of why. But it sort of comes through in the work that, Melody and I do at CDR. Just, I really like knowing the why, and I really like being able to explain the why, and I really like examining what the why is and whether or not it actually makes sense inside of different environments. And that's something that I'm still annoyingly passionate about. Still have to temper and make sure that I approach it the correct way, so as not to unintentionally give offense or be rude, which I have done in the past. But that sort of drives everything that we do, and it informs every single molecule of our training philosophy and our curriculum and how we interact with people. We're very, very encouraging of the student, our peers, whomever, asking us why. Like, that's, I think that we both deeply enjoy that sort of dialogue and interaction with people.
That is really something that sets you guys apart in a lot of ways. I don't think that you get that with a lot of different classes and instructors. And I just think that's something that really sets you guys apart, and is what can make that information so valuable, because not everyone does know to ask why. They just kind of can want to accept things as fact. And so that asking why, just in my short time that I've been able to spend just getting information from you and just being a friend with you, I've learned to ask why a lot more, and I've learned a lot more just because of that change in mindset.
Yeah. I think that, and this is really, and there's a hard line to toe here, because at a certain point, not all opinions are equal. Certain people hold opinions that they have earned, and they've earned them through hard work, blood, sweat, tears, whatever. And, fostering that curiosity in people, and also, I do not think asking why is ever inappropriate. The problem is that when most people ask it, they're not asking it from a place of genuine curiosity and a desire to explore or have a dialogue. They're asking it so that they can wait their turn to tell the other person, yeah, it's cool you think that, but here's really what the answer is. And, that's can be very problematic.
Okay, we had a brief pause, but let's move on to how and why did you develop this class?
So that actually was kind of like an amalgamation of like the perfect storm of things that happened, right? One, I was a young mother myself at the time that we really started thinking and planning for this class, or at least in my mind. I had a I think at the time, like a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn. And so this was really, really something that was on my mind. I had read a couple of articles by Greg Ellifritz where he had done some experimenting with like children in Force on Force, and he was noting the interesting responses that the parents or the protectors were doing that were intuitive to what their instincts were, but they were actually detrimental to the outcome of the scenario. And that got me really thinking about, hey, are your parental instincts actually going to help you? Or are they going to hinder you when it comes to self-defense? And I was really starting to think a lot about that. And then thirdly, I had gone to a TechCon and did a experimental learning laboratory with Craig Douglas that involved a baby. And it ended up that I ended up shooting while I had this baby in my arms. And the scenario was kind of really overwhelming because it had this element of a child that I'd never really considered what would happen if I needed to shoot and I had a child in my arms or things like that. So I really started to think about that. More for my own personal, hey, as a mom, how do I want to handle this? And then finally, the last straw was a couple of years ago, there was a woman right after Christmas. She had gotten a purse holster for her husband. And by all accounts, this woman had taken training. She knew what she was doing. And her child got access to it in Walmart and shot and killed her. And he was 2 at the time. And I remember I had a 2-year-old myself. And I remember thinking, but for the grace of God, there go I. And I was talking to a mentor and friend of mine, Kathy Jackson, and I was just really getting very passionate about how poorly the firearms industry in general has set up parents for success as far as defending themselves and keeping their little ones safe. Like when we talk about self-defense, it's very sterile. It's you, it's the bad guy. We don't really talk about all the other things that are going on. And we certainly don't talk about, hey, your 2-year-old is in your arms, or your baby is in your arms, or you have them strapped to you, or you have, they're hanging on to your leg. Like we don't talk about those things at all. And they've been something that I've been thinking about and planning for the last couple of years at that point. And I remember, kind of frustratingly, emoting to her and going, someone should make a class that does this. And she kind of sat there for a second and she goes, well, Melody, if not you, then who? And I was like, oh. So that's when we really started, that's when I really started considering it. And my first parenting, and I say parenting class, my first guns and parents class was a baby wearing and carrying. And it was just basically very, very simply, how do you carry a gun safely while still practicing what is commonly known as attachment parenting, which I'm a very, very big fan of attachment parenting, which is a lot of baby wearing. It can include co-sleeping, and it's very, it's very responsive to a child's needs. How do you be that involved in a young infant's life during those formative and developmental years and do it safely while still carrying a gun? And then John heard about this class. It kind of got national attention. And after that, he had me on the show, and I will let John take it up from there. So that's where he comes in.
So I had Melody on the podcast. Well, it was a nationally syndicated radio show at the time. I had Melody on the show. We hit it off very well. And I essentially asked her, like, hey, have you ever thought about making this a 2-day class? And she's like, and please correct me if I'm misremembering, but like was something along the lines of, I don't have the resources to do that right now. And even if I did, I wouldn't know where to start. And at the time, I did have the resources to do that. And in retrospect, I certainly thought I knew where to start, because I wildly overestimate my own capability pretty often. But I'm like, well, how about we do it together? And that's kind of what happened. And we spent, I want to say, a year and a half,
Mhm.
specifically developing the curriculum, talking with the people that we knew, doing quite a bit of research and in individual testing with our own children. I have 2 children. Melody has 3, and also going around and talking to certain people about certain things. The more research we did, the more questions there were. So that comes back to that why, and the thing that I had noticed was that most of the time when people talk about keeping, either your kids safe or your unarmed loved ones safe, or even maybe your coworkers safe, they automatically default to, executive protection, personal security detail type, techniques and tactics. And frankly, while there is some carryover, and we have carried over some things from that, for the most part, I think that is a massive mistake. And the reason why it's a massive mistake is because of the context, which comes back to, something that I was discussing in the beginning. The context is incredibly important, and a lot, not all, but a lot of training does a really poor job of examining the context. And once we started researching this topic, and I had a lot of private instruction at that point, I realized very quickly that a lot of the flat range stuff I had done, standing square with a target in front of me, was not anything it wasn't useful. And even a lot of what people would consider to be more advanced training, while some of the concepts were useful, the tactics and techniques themselves had nothing to do with the issue that I was trying to address, or that Melody and I were trying to address.
As far as the context for this class, Melody, you talked about, baby wearing and parenting in general, having your kids around. Is this class only for armed parents, or?
No, it's not. So even though we had to call it something, so and there is large portions of the class that are very, very specific to what if you have a small baby in your hands, or and we do talk about things in the lecture such as attacks specifically against children. How do you handle those? There are elements of the class that are very specific to children, and we do kind of go from infant all the way up to adult, in like, how do you handle a baby? Now, how do you handle a 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, on and on up, and those stages of development. But once you start getting into hey, how do I handle a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, or a 20-year-old? Those concepts cross over beautifully with concepts like, hey, how do I handle a friend of mine who's, we're out together, but they're not involved in this situation. They're never going to be involved. They're not of the same mindset, but I'm taking responsibility for their safety in this moment. How do I handle them? We've had a number of people come and take this class who don't have children, who don't intend to have children, and they have really enjoyed that they can use those concepts. And this is something that we talk about a lot, but people sometimes don't seem to internalize. Sometimes, just because you yourself do not have children does not mean that you're never around children, and it doesn't mean that in the moment you might not suddenly need to or choose to take responsibility for a child that's not yours. That has happened in some mass shootings and mass casualty incidents that we've at least become made aware of. And there are other instances as well where, in violent situations, or even in just natural disasters, emergency situations in general, people will make you responsible for a child that they themselves cannot be responsible for anymore. And how you respond to those situations is entirely based upon your, ability to recognize, okay, I have a parking spot for this. I have something I can do with this. So just because you don't have children doesn't mean you will never be around them. And a lot of the concepts that we get into for older children and other adults really, really will be universal no matter who you are.
Well, and I'd like to add on to that just to take that one step further. You know, a lot of people that are interested in this um, think of themselves as the good guy, and they should. That's great. That is ideally, you know, we should all be good, kind, caring, conscientious people concerned for our fellow man. And then they'll say something like, "Well, I don't have any kids," and you know, the question I like to ask is, so you're at the grocery store as your single self, and you know, there's a young mother with, you know, a toddler in a grocery cart. And your first indication of any trouble is that she takes a round right in the face and is dead on the ground. You're gonna that kid is not someone you're gonna take responsibility for. And I don't know too many people that could honestly look me in the face and say, "Yeah, f that kid. I'm out of here." Like, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I don't know too many people, if they're being intellectually honest about it, are not going to feel some level of responsibility or caring in that situation. You know, and as Melody said, a lot of the concepts that we're teaching can just really be applied to any untrained, unarmed individual that is suddenly in a violent encounter that you happen to be present at. You know, and that's what we're trying to do, is introduce you to, you know, concepts, concerns, and give you some strategies to hopefully manage them more effectively.
For me personally, going into this class, I don't have any kids, but I have friends that have kids that I'm around them in public areas, church. You know, my husband and I, we volunteer in the nursery, and we immediately resume responsibility for all of those children that are in there. So I see a lot of applications for that in my life, you know, aside from the fact that I don't have any kids of my own. So going into the next question, what skill level should your students be coming into this class with?
We put in the description that we would like for people to have some, you know, basic firearms handling ability. You know, it would be ideal and it would be preferable if this was not your first time ever firing a gun, only because then it frees your mind up to think more about the concepts and the actual tactics versus how do I run a firearm. That being said, we have literally had people come into the class that never shot a firearm before. This is their first shots that they've ever put through the gun, and we have gotten them successfully all the way through the class. So it is not necessary that you have established firearms handling and ability and training, but it's nice because when people come in and they are brand new, like I said, they're so worried about things like not pointing the gun at themselves, knowing how to load the gun, knowing how to, you know, align the sights. And they're so focused on those administrative tasks, and they're not truly administrative tasks, but you know what I mean. The basics of the handling of the firearm. That even when we start getting into the tactics and techniques, it becomes additionally overwhelming. I think they lose a little bit of that as they go out. They get some for sure, but it is not as deeply impactful as someone who comes in who has even just a decent rudimentary idea. They can really start to focus on this. We're just having all sorts of fun today.
So you were saying, Melody, the question was, you know, what level of skill should someone
Pretty
have?
much, yeah, I think I pretty much answered that. I was just recapping. So you can go. You can go now.
Well, so just to kind of build off that, we've had people literally buy the gun a couple of days before class, and I'm thinking of one specific person, and he was super uncomfortable and super unsure of himself. And you know, we try very hard to create an environment for people that is conducive towards learning. We don't have any expectation of the student and their ability other than they just have to be able to, you know, listen and follow instructions, and we'll get them through it. So I'm not going to be, I've yet to have anybody show up to class that I have judged for not having enough skill, or frankly for having a lot of skill. That's just not something that I care about. You know, kind of my goal for any class that I'm involved in is I don't care where you're starting from. I just want you to move beyond it. And I think that's really the correct attitude to have for any training that you participate in. And that doesn't matter whether you've never fired around before, or you're a GM level shooter. Like just wherever you're starting from, I want you to not stay there. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is that growth mindset, the ability to be kind to yourself, just follow instructions.
The ability to be kind to yourself.
It's a reoccurring theme in classes that we're involved in.
Well, your test and standards class is the only like formal instruction class that I've been to. And I definitely like experienced all the negative self-talk in my head. And I took a lot away from that class, but that was like the highlight, was you making a point, not only to myself, but everyone else in the class, that we shouldn't allow ourselves to talk to ourselves in a way that we wouldn't allow you to talk to us. And for some reason, the way that you put that, it clicked for me. And I was like, wow, yeah, I would never let somebody talk to me the way that I talk to myself. So
yeah,
you do a good job of facilitating that.
Thank you. It's a lesson that I have to remind myself of on a daily basis. So I don't want to say that it's not something that I too also struggle with. I think that's just part of being human. But ultimately, we all have the capacity to examine where we're at and choose not to stay there. It just requires some work.
The next question is basically just, what all do we need to be prepared to bring to the class?
Like John was saying, I think the most important thing to bring to the class is an open mind. And I'm gonna start and end. The logistical stuff. Obviously, you need ammo. You need a gun that's proper, that's functioning, well-functioning firearm. You need a holster, and we say the word a belt-mounted holster, and we've gotten questions like, "Well, I'm running an Enigma. Is that a belt-mounted holster?" Technically, it is a belt-mounted holster because it has its own belt. Something that's going to have a rigid mouth that you can holster with, and use throughout the class without much difficulty. Comfort items, weather or appropriate attire for the weather that we're planning on having, something comfortable, snacks, things like that. But we send all that out. That's fairly common. I think something that some people do forget is that, hey, if you're not used to standing out on a range all day long, something like an umbrella to keep the sun off or something can be the difference between you having a good time and you being miserable for the entire time. So thinking of those things, like if I were going to be outside for the next 6 hours, what would I want with me to keep me comfortable? Think of that when you're going to any firearms class, especially if it's going to be outdoors. But most importantly, like I said, having an open mind and the ability to examine. And I tell all of my students this, it doesn't matter what class you're in. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. All that I ask of people is that you try. You keep an open mind. You listen to what I have to say. If you're confused about what I'm trying to say, or what I'm trying to communicate, let me know. I will be happy to explain it to you again in a way that maybe is more conducive to you understanding it. But what I really don't want is someone to misunderstand something, go away and go, you know what? I didn't even get why they were doing that. It was a stupid technique. And there have been times where people have brought up questions that we have thought about it and have changed certain things about how we teach certain things, or even techniques that we maybe thought were really solid and well developed, that later on that we were like, you know what? We didn't think about this little thing that happened right here. So, but we can't do that if people are silent. And we can't do that if people are just combative to what we have. There has to be a give and a take. There has to be a willingness for you to be receptive of our information, and also for you to be willing to give us feedback back. And I think sometimes there are some classes where it's set up very, very authoritarian. I am the instructor, you are the student, you will listen to everything I say, you cannot question it. We are not that way. We very much welcome that interaction and those questions, because we want every single one of our students to go away at least, maybe not agreeing with everything that we say, but at least understanding why we're saying what we're saying, so that they have a better understanding of what we were trying to convey.
And I think Melody covered it. I don't think I have anything that I could add to that.
Sounds good. One question that came up in my head while you guys were talking was, you guys have a portion of this class that's essentially like a classroom portion where it's just talking, and you can actually just purchase that part of the class. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So there's the 4-hour lecture is a standalone. We designed the class specifically to be modular. If for whatever you had money constraints, time constraints, whatever, you could take the first 4 hours for one price. I think at this point it's $100. I think it is
125.
125. Or you could take the first whole day. The only thing that we do require is that you have at least taken day 1 before you can take day 2, because there's so much buildup and setting up of context that if you were to take day 2 standalone without having day 1, you might get a little lost on some of the stuff that we're talking about.
Pause really quick. I just wanted to mention that after the cameras were off, John mentioned to me that they actually no longer offer this class in a single day format. So you can either take the lecture portion of the class, it's like a 4-hour portion, or you could take the whole 2-day course, which of course includes that lecture portion of the class.
Or you can take, just the lecture. So it is pretty modular.
Is there anything else that you want to add to this video and just information about the class in general?
I think that one of the things that people misunderstand about TAPG in particular is that it's just about kids. It's just about, oh, I don't have kids, or I'm never going to have kids, and so therefore it doesn't apply to me. When we were designing the class, we really were trying to cover everything that you would need, not just to defend your children, but yourself as well, and anyone in your environment that you don't want to injure, that you don't, even if it's not a child, even if it's, but just being around other people, that has real world consequences, no matter where you are, and no matter if the person next to you is someone you know or someone you don't know, or an adult or a child. And the fact that we have been able to cram all of that into a 2-day class that at least gives you enough to consider what you're going to do and consider your options and think about the problem and start planning for it. I think anybody can glean from that if they're serious about defending themselves.
I don't know that I have anything of value to add to that. That's pretty much the thing, is that, one of our friends came and took the class, and they said, I was expecting a shooting class, and you guys have done an incredible job of disguising a thinking with a gun in your hand class as a shooting class. And the thing that people need to understand is that oftentimes you go to training, you're told exactly what to do, when to do it. And, it's very difficult from a logistic standpoint to recreate the ambiguity of an actual situation in a square range class. And we can't, but we can at least introduce people to the concepts, give people sort of a direction to go if they're in that. And we are certainly priming people to begin thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think there's a lot of value there. And, there are classes that deal solely with the ambiguity of an actual violent situation. I think Craig Douglas is the master of that. I don't think anyone comes even close, being honest. And it's certainly something that I would encourage everyone to do, to put themselves in those situations over and over and over again, to figure out their areas where, they could stand to improve. But if you're not interested in that kind of life, and you're not going to be the type of person that is able to do that, coming to something like this and at least have it in the back of your head, is certainly better than never having considered it at all.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and taking time out of your day to, talk about this class and, explain what it's about and the things that we can glean from that. So I appreciate you guys taking time out, and I'll see you guys at the class in Washington.
Sweet.
All right, thank you so much.
I want to mention really quick that I have included all the information that you need down below in the description to learn more about this class and even to sign up if you choose to. I hope this video was helpful for you, and maybe that it even encouraged you to look into getting some more training this summer, or even look into seeing if they're offering this class or other classes somewhere near you. So thanks again for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next week.
I've got solutions for solutions. Hold on, I'm coming.
I'm including this in the video.
Do you see how amused I look right now, Tessa? And this doesn't look out of the ordinary either, does it? This is just like a face that I oftentimes make around Melody.
It works with us.
I'm including this in the video because it's a testament just to like how the class is going to go in general.
Right? Like, just expect craziness to happen. Craziness will abound, and that's just how it's going to happen.
I don't think that's true. Actually, I'm gonna have
It's
to.
not true. It's gonna be wonderful. It's gonna be fabulous. Hold on.